Okay, let's unpack this. We live in a world just saturated with health information, right? You see it everywhere. 15-second videos, uh, big headlines. But why do some medical myths, the ones that feel kind of right, why do they stick around for so long?
Well, I think it's often because they tap into old fears or they just seem logical on the surface.
Right.
And they get passed down, through families, through culture. It makes them incredibly sticky, even when science has pretty clearly shown they're wrong, sometimes for decades.
And that's really our mission today. We want to give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. We're doing a deep dive into 6 really common, really stubborn health myths.
Hmm.
We're looking at insights from a recent SciTech Daily analysis and cross-referencing with places like the Mayo Clinic, Harvard Health, Johns Hopkins. Basically, we want to help you ditch that old questionable info and get up to speed with the modern medical reality.
Yeah, and this is knowledge you can actually use right away. How you treat your body, how you think about risks, even how you advise other people.
Exactly. So let's start with a couple of foundational myths. These are about basic body functions, timing, and hydration. And we'll kick off with one about biology that still causes a lot of confusion. And honestly, it could be pretty dangerous if it's misunderstood.
Yeah, we're talking about that really pervasive myth that a woman can't get pregnant if she's on her period.
Right.
It's surprisingly common, this belief. But it just completely ignores some basic reproductive facts.
It seems like the common idea is, if the body's shedding the lining, then the system's kind of reset, the window's closed. So what's the actual flaw in that thinking, according to groups like the American Pregnancy Association?
Well, the flaw is all about timing, specifically how long sperm can actually survive.
Ah,
So while getting pregnant during your period is rare, it's definitely possible. And that's because sperm are pretty resilient. They can stay viable, active in the reproductive system for up to 5 days, just waiting.
5 days. Wow. Okay, that's a huge variable.
It really is. So now think about someone with a shorter than average cycle, maybe 22, 24 days instead of the typical 28.
Okay.
If she has intercourse near the end of her period and then she ovulates a bit earlier than average, well, those 5 days of sperm viability can easily overlap with her fertile window.
Right. The math just works out differently then.
Exactly. You've got a 5-day wait time for the sperm, potentially, combined with early ovulation. Fertilization can happen. It's a really critical biological detail that, frankly, needs to be better understood.
That is profound. It
Uh,
basically turns what seems like a safe time into, well, a potential risk zone, all depending on the individual's own cycle length.
Precisely. Everybody is different, and that variation just cancels out the certainty of that myth.
Okay, so from the variability of biological timing, let's shift to variability of quantity, specifically maybe the most famous hydration myth ever, the 8 glasses of water a day rule.
The 8-glass rule. It's so arbitrary, isn't it? But it's everywhere. We've all kind of internalized it as like gospel truth, maybe just because it's a nice round number.
Yeah, sounds good.
But when you look at the science, it just doesn't hold up.
The Mayo Clinic actually called this target unknowable as just a blanket rule for everyone. They basically say, for most people, the simplest advice works. Just drink when you're thirsty. But why did that 8-glass thing get so stuck in our heads?
Well, it's probably a leftover from older, maybe vaguer recommendations that didn't really account for individual needs. And what's really fascinating is how much the actual amount of water you need can change, like day to day. If you're working out hard, sweating a lot or super hot out,
Right.
you're going to need way more fluid. But if you're just chilling inside, maybe less.
And we often forget, I think, that it's not just about water from a glass, right? Our food plays a big role, too.
Exactly. If you eat a lot of foods with high water content, think fruits like watermelon, strawberries, or veggies like cucumbers, lettuce, you're already getting a good chunk of your hydration needs just from your meals. Those foods actually reduce the amount of plain water you need to drink. Your body is, honestly, incredibly good at signaling thirst. Trust that signal. Don't chase some generic arbitrary number.
That makes sense. Okay, let's move to our next section. We've talked basic body functions. Now let's look at a couple of really ingrained myths about internal discomfort and diet. First up, the idea that spicy food and stress cause stomach ulcers.
Oh yeah, this myth has amazing staying power. And it makes a certain kind of sense, right? You feel this burning pain, so you naturally assume that spicy curry or, the stress eating away at you must have caused the actual damage.
And it's stuck around forever, probably because, let's be honest, those things do make the pain worse. But what does the modern science, like from the American Academy of Family Physicians, say is the real primary cause?
Yeah, the medical world's been pretty clear on this for decades now. The vast majority of stomach ulcers are actually caused by a bacterial infection. It's called H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori.
So it's literally an infection, not just a reaction to something you ate.
In most cases, yes, it's bacteria. It's something that often needs antibiotics to clear up.
Okay.
Now, there is another significant cause, which is the long-term chronic use of certain common painkillers. Specifically, NSAIDs, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and aspirin. So think, ibuprofen, naproxen used regularly over time.
Right, that clarifies the actual origin. But let's go back to that original belief. If spicy food and stress don't cause the ulcers, why did everyone, even doctors for a while, focus so much on diet and stress?
Well, because while they aren't the cause, they are definitely powerful aggravators.
Okay.
Spicy foods, high stress levels, caffeine, alcohol, they all tend to increase stomach acid production and irritation. So if you already have a weakened stomach lining because of H. pylori or maybe from NSAID use, yeah, those things are absolutely going to ramp up the pain and probably slow down your healing.
So the trigger feels like the cause.
Exactly. But it's really just irritating a problem that was already there.
That's a great distinction. Okay, let's move to myth number 4. This might be the biggest nutritional villain of the whole 20th century. The idea that eating eggs gives you heart disease because they're high in cholesterol.
Oh, eggs. Yeah, they were the dietary bad guy for decades. So many people, even now, still limit how many they eat based on warnings from, the 70s and 80s.
Totally.
And the assumption seems simple. Cholesterol in food equals cholesterol in your blood, which equals heart disease.
But the science has completely flipped that idea on its head, hasn't it?
Yeah.
What's the real culprit, according to places like Harvard Health?
They confirm it. Whole eggs, for someone who's generally healthy otherwise, do not cause heart disease. The real issue is eating too much saturated and trans fat. And this is where it gets, I think, really interesting because we need to talk about how our bodies actually handle this stuff.
Yeah.
The mechanism.
Yes. Okay, explain that. Why does the liver, which is kind of central command for managing fats in our blood, react more to the type of fat we eat rather than just the amount of cholesterol we eat?
So what we understand now is that the high levels of LDL, that's the bad cholesterol in our blood, most of that is actually manufactured by our own liver.
Oh.
The liver makes cholesterol based on what the body needs. And what signals the liver to really ramp up making LDL? It's primarily the saturated and trans fats that we consume.
So the liver sees those unhealthy fats coming in, figures it needs to process them, and starts making more LDL itself. It's not just a reflection of the cholesterol in, say, your breakfast eggs.
Precisely. The liver's the main control system here. If you eat a diet that's really heavy in saturated fats, processed meats, lots of butter, fried foods that signal to the liver basically overrides the relatively small amount of cholesterol you'd get from a couple of eggs.
Right.
So blaming the whole egg, which, by the way, is packed with other nutrients, while ignoring the bigger picture of a high-fat diet, that's just missing the point of the actual metabolic science.
That context is so important. Heart disease is complex, right? It involves weight, exercise, smoking, and a diet high in those processed fats. We've maybe been pointing the finger at the wrong thing for a long time.
Absolutely. Misdirected focus.
Okay, let's pivot now to our final section. We're focusing on myths about the mind, injury, and healing. And let's start with the serious injury where old advice can actually be harmful. Concussions.
Yeah, this is such a classic case of, cultural habit overriding what's actually best medically.
The rule we all heard was, if someone gets a concussion, you have to keep them awake, or at least wake them up every couple of hours through the night. Where did that fear originally come from?
Well, that idea really came from the time before we had easy access to CT scans and MRIs.
Okay.
Doctors were, quite rightly, worried that someone with a head injury might develop a serious internal bleed like an intracranial hemorrhage or slip into a coma, and nobody would realize it if they were just left asleep. Waking them up was kind of a basic, crude way to check their neurological status.
So, understandable fear back then, but based on outdated tech and knowledge. But now, the medical thinking is that denying sleep actually works against recovery.
It does. A concussion is, by definition, a mild traumatic brain injury. And the number one rule for treating pretty much any physical injury, especially one involving the brain, is rest.
Right.
The brain desperately needs sleep to help with recovery, to repair damage at a cellular level, manage inflammation, all that stuff. Constantly waking someone up just interrupts the body's main healing process. Assuming they've been checked out and are stable, letting them get a good night's sleep does far more good.
And it's worth saying again, concussions are tricky because you often can't see them on a standard scan, right?
That's exactly right. Unlike, say, a broken bone, you diagnose the severity of a concussion almost entirely based on the symptoms the person reports: headache, dizziness, nausea, memory issues. So, unless there's specific medical advice saying otherwise after an evaluation, rest, especially sleep, is absolutely key.
Okay, that leads us to our final myth, and this one might be the most widely popularized health myth maybe ever. The 10% brain myth. The idea that humans only use a tiny fraction of their brain power, leaving 90% just sitting there waiting.
Oh, that one. Neurologist Dr. Barry Gordon at Johns Hopkins famously called that idea so wrong it's almost laughable.
Yeah.
And yet, it fuels so many self-help books, bad sci-fi plots, because it taps right into that desire we all have for, like, hidden potential.
We know the brain is incredibly complex. So what does Johns Hopkins say about how efficiently it actually works? How much of it we use?
Well, think about it. The brain controls literally everything your body does. Every thought, memory, emotion, every movement, breathing, hunger, body temperature, everything.
Yeah, right, all of it.
If 90% of your brain was truly dormant, offline, you'd be severely impaired, probably couldn't move or even breathe.
Okay, so if the brain is constantly working, where did this 10% idea even come from? Does it have to do with how brain scans look sometimes, like only parts light up?
That's probably the key misunderstanding. It is true that not every single neuron in your brain is firing all at the exact same second.
Okay.
Your brain is actually super efficient. It only sends energy where it's needed for the task at hand. So, like, if you're running, huge areas involved in motor control and coordination light up. If you're sitting quietly trying to solve a math problem, different parts, maybe in the frontal lobes, become active for calculation and memory.
And the brain uses a ton of energy, right? Like 20% of the body's total energy. So using 100% all the time would be impossible anyway.
Exactly. If every single neuron fired constantly, your whole system would just overload and crash. The brain is dynamic. It manages its resources really well, using all areas over time regularly, but only activating the specific networks needed right now. There's no unused 90% just waiting for a magic switch.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into these 6 really persistent myths. What seems consistent across all of them, whether it's basic biology like sperm survival or hydration, or complex things like ulcers and concussions, it's the need to question that old information, even if it feels right or sounds logical.
That need for critical thinking is just so crucial.
Yeah.
And what really stands out to me is how often science keeps refining our understanding, even of the most basic body functions. We learned today that things we thought were simple rules, like what causes an ulcer, how much water to drink, are actually way more nuanced than the rules we might have inherited.
It definitely reframes how we look at diet and risk, too. We spent a good bit of time on that cholesterol myth, establishing that it's really the liver reacting to those bad saturated fats that's manufacturing most of the cholesterol in our blood. It's almost like the liver's protecting us from the dietary cholesterol in eggs.
Yeah, that discovery really turned nutrition science on its head. So does that mean we should maybe shift our focus entirely, like away from the cholesterol number on food labels, and demand really clear, prominent labeling about saturated and trans fats instead? And what would that kind of shift mean for how food is marketed globally? It's a pretty profound question, something for you to think about or maybe explore on your own.
That's a great challenge to leave everyone with. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you next time.